Apparent exception number 4, hierarchical exfoliation. Next, I shall discuss a case in which the untrained observer is perhaps the most puzzling of all. The case of brilliant, productive worker who not only wins no promotion but is even dismissed for his post. Let me give a few examples, then I will explain them. In Exceller City, every new school teacher is placed on 1 year's probation. K. Bachman had been a brilliant English scholar at the university. In his probationary year of English teaching, he managed to infuse his students with his own enthusiasm for classical and modern literature. Some of them obtained Exceller's City Public Library cards. Some began to haunt new and used bookstores. They became so interested that they read many books that were not on the Exceller School approved reading list. Before long, several irate parents and delegations from two austere religious sects visited the school superintendent to complain that the children were studying undesirable literature. Buckman was told that his services would not be required the following year. Probationary teacher Lee Curley's first teaching assignment was to a special school of retarded children. Although he had been warned that these children would not accomplish very much, he proceeded to teach them all he could. By the end of the year, many of the clerks Curley's retarded children scored better on standardized achievement tests of reading and arithmetic than did in regular classes. When Curley received his dismissal notice, he was told that he had grossly neglected the bed stringing, sandbox, and other busy work, which were the things that retarded children should do. He had failed to make adequate use of the modeling clay, pegboards, and finger paints specially provided by the Exceller's City Special Education Department. Miss E. Beaver was a probationary primary teacher, was highly gifted intellectually. Being inexperienced, she put into practice what she had learned at the college about making allowances for pupils' individual differences. As a result, her brighter pupils finished 2 or 3 years' work in 1 year. The principal was very courteous when he explained that Miss Beaver could not be recommended for permanent engagement. He knew she would understand that she had upset the system, had not stuck to the course of studies, and had created hardship for the children who would not fit into the next year's program. She had disrupted the official marking system and textbook issuing system and had caused several anxiety to the teacher who would next year have to handle the children who had already covered the work. The paradox explained. These cases illustrate that in fact, in most hierarchies, supercompetence is more objectionable than incompetence. Ordinary incompetence, as we have seen, is no cause for dismissal. It is simply a bar for promotion. Super incompetence often leads to dismissal because it disrupts the hierarchy and thereby violates the first commandment of hierarchical life. The hierarchy must be preserved. You will recall that in chapter 2, I discussed 3 classes of employees: the incompetent, the moderately competent, and the competent. At that time, for simplicity's sake, I chopped off 2 extremes of the disruption curve and omitted 2 more classes of employees. Here are the complete curves. Employees in the 2 extreme classes, the super competent and the super incompetent, are alike subjects to dismissal. They are usually fired as soon as being hired, for the same reason that they tend to disrupt the hierarchy. The slogging off of extremes is called hierarchical exfoliation. Some horrible examples. I have already described the fate of super competent employees. Here are some examples of super incompetence. months. Miss P. Saucer was hired as a sales girl in the appliance department of the Lokmark department store. From the start, she sold less than average amount of merchandise. This alone would not have been cause of dismissal because many other salespeople were below average as well. But Miss Saucer record keeping was atrocious. She punched wrong keys on the cash register, accepted competitors' credit cards, and still worse, inserted the carbon paper with the wrong side up while filling in sales contract forms. She then managed to give the customer the original of the contract. He left with two records, one on the front of the contract and other is reversed on the back. She was left with none. Worst of all, she was insolent to the superiors. She was dismissed after 1 month. Mr. Kirk, a Protestant clergyman, held radical views on the nature of deity, the efficiency of the sacraments, the second coming of Christ, and life after death. His views sharply opposed the official doctrine of his sect. Technically then, Kirk was incompetent to give his parishioners the spiritual guidance they expected. He received no promotion, of course. Nevertheless, he retained his position for several years. Then he wrote a book when condemning the Stoddy church hierarchy and propounded a reasoned argument favoring taxation of all churches. He asked that recognition be extended to such problems as homosexuality, drug abuse, racial injustice, and the like. He had moved at one jump from incompetence to super incompetence and was promptly dismissed. The super incompetent exfoliate must have two important characteristics. He fails to produce outcome. He fails to support internal consistency of hierarchy, that is the input. Apparent exception number 5. The paternal instinct. Some owners of old-fashioned family businesses used to treat their son like regular employees. The boy would start at the bottom of the hierarchy and rise in accordance with the Pareto principle. Here, of course, the owner's love for his hierarchy, his desire to keep it efficient and profitable, and his stern sense of justice overweighed his natural familial affections. Often though, the owner of such business would bring his son in at a higher level with the idea that in time, without rising through the ranks, he would take over the supreme command or, as the face went, should step into his father's shoes. This type of placement, therefore, I call the paternal instep. There are two principal means by which the paternal instep is executed. Paternal instep S method. Number 1. As existing employee may be dismissed or removed by the lateral arabesque and persuasive sublimation to make a place for the instepper. Used less often, the method number 2. This technique may cause considerable ill feeling towards the new appointee. Paternal instep method number 2. A new position with an impressive title is created for the instepper. In the methods explained. The paternal instep is merely a small-scale example on the situation that exists under a class system, where certain favored individuals enter a hierarchy above the class barrier instead of at the bottom. This infusion of new employees at a high level may sometimes increase output. The paternal instep therefore arouses ill feeling outside the hierarchy. Yet the arrival of the instepper is to a degree resented by other members of the hierarchy. Employees actually have a sentimental feeling for the promotion process by which they themselves have risen and by which they hope to rise further. They tend to resent placements made by other means. Paternal instep today. The family business, controlled by one man with the authority to place his son in its higher ranks, is nowadays something of a rarity. Nevertheless, the paternal instinct is still executed in just the same way, except that the instepper need not be related to the official who appoints him. Let me cite a typical example. Okay, paternal instep file in a case number 7. Purefoy, director of the Exeter City Health and Sanitation Department, found that by the end of one financial year he was going to have some unexpected funds. The citizens had suffered no epidemics, the Exeter's river had not, as it often did, overflowed its banks and silted up the drainage system. Both his assistant directors, one of health, the other of sanitation, were earnest, competent, economically minded men. So the budgeted funds had not been spent. Purefoy realized that unless he took rapid action, he would suffer a cut in the coming year's budget. He determined to create a third assistant directorship, whose incumbent would organize his anti-litter and city beautification program. To fill the new position, he engaged W. Pickwick, a young graduate from the School of Business Administration of his own alma mater. Pickwick in turn created 11 more new posts: an anti-litter supervisor, 6 litter inspector, a 3-girl office staff, and a public relations officer. N. Wordsworth, the PRO, organized essay contests for school children, adult contests for jiggles and poster design, and commissioned 2 films, one for anti-litter propaganda, the other for city beautification. The film was to be made by an independent producer who had been with Wordsworth and Pickwick in the University Dramatic Society. Everything worked out well. Director Purefox exceeded his budget and was successful in obtaining a large budget for the year following. This was the end of the chapter 3 of the book The Peter Principle, written by Dr. Lawrence J. Peter and Rebel Hull. I have divided this chapter in 2 parts. The chapter 1 was uploaded a few days back, and this is the second part. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, thank you, and please continue. I'll see you soon.